Good morning. We start with Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga from the small booklet. From the heart of the Savior of 100 deities of Tushita, on a peak of cloud resembling a clam of extremely white fresh curd, King of Dhamma, omniscient Losandrapa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me on a lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit for my mind of faith, please abide for 100 yawns to spread the teachings. Your holy mind has the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanations is an ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember, I prostrate. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lice, scented water, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated, I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practice in this degenerate age, and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the eight worldly concerns. Savior, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect, pure, holy gurus, from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued, exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure Losandrapa's teachings to shine forever. Sajibaki Jushi Metok Tramri Nidegyempadi Sangye Jindu Mikte Owa Idrokunamda Geshe-la Chupasho. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lama Tsongkhapa and his two sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of the victorious one Losandrapa, who had a morality of eminently pure way of life, was courageous in the extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious ones, and accomplish the yoga of two stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of the perfect pure Father and Sons, and combining into one enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of tube of white light. cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and their imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. Now we recite 5-line Mixema on page 8, 3 times together. Migme tsewe te chen chen rezik, drime gempe wampo jampel yang, dupo malu jonze saweda, kanchen gepe tsungen tsong kapa, lo sandra pe shabla soade. Migme tsewe te chen chen rezik, drime gempe wampo jampel yang, dupo malu jonze saweda, kanchen kepe tsungen tsong kapa, lo sandra pe shabla soade. Migme tsewe te chen chen rezik, drime gempe wampo jampel yang, dupo malu jonze saweda, kanchen kepe tsungen tsong kapa, lo sandra pe shabla solwade. And a prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in a glory for fortunate disciples.
Dāng jiāp sū chī dāgi chū shī ye bāng dā dāgi rō lāṃ pēn shī sāng jī rū pā rā shō sāng jī shū dāng tsō jī chōng lōng lā chāng chū pā rā dāng jiāp sū dāgi chū shī ye bāng dā dāgi rō lāṃ pēn shī sāng jī rū pā rā shō sāng jī shū dāng tsō jī chōng lōng lā chāng chū pā rā dāng jiāp sū dāgi chū shī ye bāng dā dāgi rō lāṃ pēn sāng jī rū pā rā shō 강기 투진이 손에 따와 담지 밤비처럼 담비춘 된세 고동 때라 창세로 나무라에 깨달으는 저기 주변다는 미있게 놓는 저 군지라는 좀 담시게 최된도 Good morning everyone. 샤브델레 고문의 전학.
Hello.
달랬어. sorry. 대행한저 샘 그걸로 직시에 걸었어 라브라스라 아니 야
So today I was told to talk about.
타마드 고마서.
So today I was told to talk about mind.
누르셔서라. 어디다 또 샘금 리비 남샤세치 여러스로 샘금 리비 남샤티 tamashi tama kingirada thoma chik jongkunti gyagani chongshakwa. Teni karsawarda chik thoma di chik nambi chwe matar koni gyagalaya semgam rikbi namshati shukchenbu yosarese.
So the concept of mind or psychology is very prevalent, is a very huge topic. And even before the teaching of Buddha flourished, the concept of mind is very prevalent in other Indian schools of thought as well.
Tadini number sanjibi ta chud tarni ani semgam rikbi kordita ting sabu shuchik deshi chong yores ra.
And then when Buddhist teachings on mind flourish, then the discussion and the descriptions even become more sophisticated.
Then the chadalogi nga shusho dasrayna ngarang shitsu kozo chewayna teni semgi namshati semgi iyawa chela soba takdon du sem la yachik ani semaden semigi namsha kanji lorik dun la sobe namsha chedi ani türüp katıyla tanda löben çolan çorak yapsela sobe kablatini shiv tsakbu shoji chong yosarez.
So the concept of mind were hello?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So the concept of the mind and particularly the different typologies of the mind were, and as well as the categorization of the mind into valid and invalid mind, and so on and so forth, and the typology of mind, categorizing mind into 7 different kinds. All of these different systems of categorizing mind into different categories were further kind of refined or further become elaborated during the time of Dignaga and Dharmakriti's time.
Teni that dhyan pigi dachi lori dungi namsha cheche ani tinani ya chik semaden semiji sheba semala ya ani yawa tu chen da namsha chewa tsammase tindigi namsha dhyan pigi dachi sanji chomden digi jinju ani tumda mawa shigi ani dötso da jarcheni teni son yores ra.
And then if you look at the description of mind in Buddhist science of mind, you could find that mind could be seen as primarily categorizing into 7 different kinds of mind, 7 different classifications of mind consciousness. And then there's the categorization of mind into valid and invalid cognition. And not only that, the concept of valid and invalid consciousness is explained in accordance with the tenet system of 4 schools of thought within Buddhism.
There the din the dindigi namjati, the dindigi namjati, the same silangwandi, oniji and the same gum ribig namja things sabuji shilaya, any kebatuzugi lekshilaya. This jamba chitubana, then is same gum ribig namjati, susu samlayachik, troyobarochik, shin to yaji, the yunguyores, ra yunguyores.
And to kind of to deepen our understanding about mind and concept of consciousness, it's really important for us to familiarize ourselves with this concept and familiarize ourselves with the writings of those great masters who have written exclusively on the concept of mind and consciousness.
These are the Dindrigita Savigi Taji Yondando di Nanzu Milapa Jarbaina Namjita Nanzu Lunga Yixum Sech Lunga Yixum La Pachani Ani Tinangi Yilaya Any easy yit chechine Ani Sam Gam Girib Namjati Shigiores.
So here, the concept or the description of mind is, of course, related with our our mental world. And that being said, for instance, when we talk about a person or a being, we could talk about his body, speech, and mind. And here, the concept of consciousness is included within the category of mind, and then that mind as a substratum, then we could talk about different classifications of consciousness or mind.
Tadini Yi said the piggy number shivalaya number shiva said. And it's Sam Kong Yochiondi, and it's so number shiva says down. And it Tini Kor and it Sam John said, Tanganjik, and it's Sorwa than Dushila Sobigi, and it Namdan Tijikita, your niche in the share is.
And here, when we talk about mind or consciousness, primarily they are categorized into two different primary, types of kinds. The first one is the primary mind, and the secondary one is called the mental factors, such as feeling and perception and so on and so forth.
Tadini number shiva dishaondi. Number shiva truk in namsha. Number shiva truk chigores. Number shiva truk di kari toni chigres ladi. So ombungal tembigi namshingata yi pigi yi korana tembigi number shiva chigchene. Number shiva truk namsha tu chigores ra.
Okay, this last question.
Number shiva truk namsha chigores ra. Number shiva truk yedan di ombungal tembi number shiva ngachita yi korana tembi number shiva chigchene. Number shiva truk namsha chigores.
And here, as far as the primary mind is concerned, usually they are categorized into 6 different types, and the first 5 are associated with the sensory sense faculty, and the 6th one is associated with the mental faculty.
Tadini ngarang sorwar dasra ngal anzu number shiva tambunga di wangbu ngal tembi shiva ngadi nganzu luda ra nganzu luda hajange ani dewa nyibu injimini luda 땡이 용 거야지. 류든 젠이 용 거야지. 내든직 차고래스. 로.
So the first five consciousnesses that are primarily related with the sensory faculties, physical sensory faculties, so they are, very much dependent on our physical bodies, sensory faculties, and they are not only dependent, but they have to come in, in relation with the sensory faculty.
근데 일 댐비 넘버 10디 더 남비 송니 아니 pena ta chinanchu matar kongi pi ani yagar ki narew kita region nang la ina ani khokyawang hashi sadi shegor was ani tindi gi yila tembi namba shibi gyundi ani nganzu tsin di gi ani lu ragba delaya tezam gu ani tösum chimbu yo mares ta kanji yo mares ro.
And the sixth consciousness that is dependent or that is associated with the consciousness is even by the pre as well. And as far as that is concerned, the subtle mental world not really depends or upon level.
또된 다지 아니 체대도 자제 배시 직진 드니 교인 시그레. Internet is good. Sorry. Not problem here. Are you sure? Carson.
Okay, I'll try without the video. How is it? Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm terrible. Okay, I'm sorry. Without the video, I also feel more comfortable. Okay. So, so Geshe-la was talking about the, mental consciousness that is not dependent on the sensory faculties, that is primarily dependent on the, mental kind of faculty. That subtle mind is not kind of contingent upon the gross level of physical faculties. For instance, when we talk about the concept of life after death, when that happens, this subtle consciousness kind of transfers. So therefore, it is not kind of highly dependent on the gross physical body.
There is the namshi tangbunga di lu ongbo dang lu ongbo dan jewa yoba ani lu pigi karsa da chik ani manzu leza la soba dang hachang ki deta nyebu chik cha yoba zang ani kab la ya chik pigi ongbo dang ongbo la tembi ani namshi ni chik ani norde ya la soba ani chik ongbo khara rang pe ani namshi la shagu du sambi ani karsa da chik dushi yung de ya la soba ani chik begi lebe tsa chamo doso ya hachang ki tötsop chimbo yobanza ani dutsu ya chik ani yul tongin ki ani semla ya shagu du sambi sowa legi medro samsung dachi tingara thokba yins.
And now, as far as the first five sense consciousness are concerned, they are dependent on the sensibility, And then since they are, highly on the sensory, um, including, different mechanisms of the brain, people.
Gas. 파고대 아주 수치 고문도 okay, maybe Sunday. Maybe Sunday. 파고대.
Nganzala mixi kudu kila mixi dini cheba jawda ke mindu.
Nganzala samza bed chero.
Okay, answer.
Yeah. I want to use it.
Okay. Okay, so the first five faculties that are dependent upon the sensory faculties. So since they are highly dependent upon the physical sensory faculties, sometimes people tend to mistake between the consciousness and the sensory faculty that is, that serve as the substratum for the consciousness. And then personally, I sometimes feel that, people often tend to mistake between even the subtle mechanisms of the brain, which could be served as a substratum for the functions of the consciousness as the kind of consciousness itself that could perceive objects.
Tereda pena anzu migi number shevas laundi. Mishi di ta pigi nambi shonglo nalala ya mishi kedan di kandas kini sungu yores laundi. Ani mishi kanla tensagi ombo singi di shagores. Ombo sujemba shagorasro. Ombo sujemba di ya yul di yul sugdan ombo sujemba ni tebal teni ani Geshe-la ya migi namba sheba yul sawi yul sawati yul sawa yul rikpati ani pigi ombo tama teda sujin ni tebal teni ani yul sawi gi wangshi kebati tindijini shegore sra.
So there are, several different types of kind of consciousness that is dependent on the physical faculty. For instance, the eye consciousness is, generated dependent upon several different factors. And one factor is that in order for eye consciousness to arise, it has to depend upon a kind of a physical sensory faculty, and that sensory faculty has to meet with the object that the eye consciousness is kind of supposed to perceive. So when the object and the eye sensory faculty have, have a contact, or when they meet together, then the kind of eye consciousness somehow could, perceive the object. So that is how the eye consciousness is generated. First it has to depend upon the eye sensory faculty, and that eye sensory faculty has to meet with the object, and then only the eye consciousness could perceive its object. So that's when we say I see something.
Draw yours the penanganzugi Ombudi Nuba Yabu can maybe Kabdula and Anzu Mishi the sea which have yours Mishi P Yabu Tongora daro. That any choching the Nazala Soviet Johnny Ombula Kian Leondi any soon Toma to Yala Soba. Choching Manzu Lug Ranjin the Ranjin Kobiondi Lochir Drondi Zubu Chi Chane Kobondi Tig Chashi Samalo 아니 누가 냠 줘야 되고 오늘 춘이라서라 왕부 마 냠온디 아주 믹시드 마세번 줘거라서라 다 비기 아니 지금 메셔를 소비 아주 믹시기 아니 무슨 통역이 믹시기야기 그냥 간지는 제도가 등하란 상으로더랑이 직진은 데벨로 쇼드니 형 시그더라 비기 왕부라야 누가 셰고 디기라 왕부라야 누가 제 두고야서레스 가서는 미시 딩이디야 엄빈 누번 야 빠니 엄빈 누바디 야 빠니 셰고 슈세드 디기어라서라 진짜 콜이야 누바지 제바인서 디기 또지 율수困难 샤야디 아니 슈체드로요 텔데니 미시 시우차요 딘디지 로고여서 삼고도스라
So, so one reason why eye consciousness is dependent on eye's kind of sensory faculty could be understood from the fact that when people have sometimes when people loses their vision or when we age, our kind of overall physical strength deteriorates. So along with that, our vision also could deteriorate. In other cases, due to other reasons, our visions may, kind of deteriorate. So in such cases, we use kind of specs to enhance our vision. And then when we use specs to enhance our vision, what we do is that we are really trying to enhance the kind of power of the sensory physical faculty, so that the vision could be restored. So that time what happens is that the specs that we use kind of somehow enhances the ability of the sensory faculty that once has deteriorated. Then when that kind of specs would give us support to the sensory faculty to enhance its kind of original ability, so that we could have a clearer vision of the object that we are kind of seeing.
다드니 다 원시의 간들이었어야지. 원시의 가르레스, 원시의 과열레스, 간들레스. 근데 제바디 연구하라서라. 다 원시 상원디 제바디 연구하라서라. 다 제바 제단들이야. 지금 다 타부여 뭐도 지 군수비 율이야 제바 제단 제단. 대한당비 율이야 제바 제단기. 제바 지수를 뭐 이샤야레스. 당한주 망부 쇼지기 제바 치온디 군수기 율기 적당 디리 셀게니 대한당도 요축기 제베 돌아야 아니 쇼르고도지 요레스라 대한당기 제베 돌아야 쇼르온디 피기 인지 민지기 가리 여바디 유디니 주주사지 다 문제야진 데레사지 요거레 삼비기 아니 토니 제바 치온디 디코 요거야디 시샤진 제바 치온디 다 피기를 지 샤주키기로 왔어 다 디샤온디 단 데레사 치기 율라 샤와이나 치기 율이야 아니 시비 남자 샤와이나 저니니다 저 대고 말아서 연구 걸어 말아서 단 난기 아니 이 가서 다 차시질이야 다디 왕복 코라랑 왕복 코라랑 디베 아니 유진 시버레셔스 등에 로르동다 직니 콘래야 총여러 왔어 아니 지로 야타카시 콘래야 지 비기게 엄비 싸코랑 레버 코랑 시버레스 등에 총여러 왔어 가슴에 제바 지용디 피기래야 주주사지 요거를 삼치네 주주사지 맨날 싸우니는 지금 말해 삼치네 디실라샤니 제바 지용디 아니 문제 치던 노르데 망부 텐데 용구여서레스
And here, when we talk about sense consciousness, then obviously the next question is, what is sense consciousness? How do we posit sense consciousness? And that is kind of the question that to all of our mind when we engages in the discussions of sense consciousness. And to kind of answer that question, there are usually two different ways of looking at this question. One is from the point of view of conventional understanding, and the another one is to answer that from the point of view of ultimate understanding. And when you kind of analyze this concept from the ultimate point of view, people tend to assume that when we analyze, we have to kind of find something at the ultimate level. We should be kind of pinpoint something, or we should be able to posit something out there that we are trying to find. So from that point of view, people tend to feel that the I consciousness that we are searching should be kind of should be uh, should be able to, we should be able to posit that somewhere out there. So therefore, we tend to make the mistakes that even in early times, people have mistaken the sensory faculty as the consciousness itself, or some scholars even tend to posit the kind of brain activity, or rather the neurons, as the consciousness, sense consciousness itself. So that mistakes primarily occurs when we have the assumption that the things should be out there objectively. But when we talk about from the other perspective, the consciousness is somehow distinct from the physical faculty, or the sense organ that serve as its substratum. So therefore, the consciousness is not kind of not there on the object itself, but although it is dependent on it, but it's not there on the object, on the sense faculty.
Dirda, the Muni Dabina, Onshidoji, Shavaina, Savigi, any Shibi, Tenda, Ten Koran, and Munzichi ondi, and it the Saris Sasha Rigbas, Salva, Rigba, Yul Sawa, Yur Rigbati, Yur Rigbati, and Shibares, Yur Rigbati. That didn't some said the inch the young kanji, you Rigbati Shibares, love yours. You Rigbati. Nanzu dos and Karan so far, the Karan's on Suta, Nanzu Chigjing Tong Ajora, Chigjing Tomat, Tongu Karanda, Shibala Shago Mare, Chigjing Tomati, Chigjing Rigbati, Shibares. That the carry the Yuri, the carries Jeba Chesasiki, Koratara, Tomating on the New Trip de the Dishiba Shago was that is.
So here, again, when we talk about sense consciousness, usually the definition of consciousness is posited as clear and knowing, and both terms clear and knowing should be associated with the ability of the consciousness in its with regard to its engagement with the object. For instance, when we see each other, my kind of eye consciousness perceives the object in front of me, and your eye consciousness also perceives the object in front of you. And when you see something, the object that you see is not the eye consciousness, but rather that is the object of the eye consciousness. So the action of mere seeing the object is the consciousness, right? So the object is not the consciousness that you see, but the how to say, the kind of mechanism or the functioning of seeing its object, the ability to perceive its object, is the consciousness.
When a cousin Karchiva didn't on the same layer, temperature, tempati, the temper, the temper said there, tempati. Tengu Kazang Netan Diamare, Tenging Tiri Midiamare, Kazang Nilu tempati, temple shago rasra. Or these orders that.
For instance, when we talk about remembering an object, remembering something that happened yesterday, so the object of yesterday is not the kind of remembering or the memory. Rather, yesterday's person is not also the memory, but also the consciousness that remembers in past event is posited as the remembering or the memory. So that is a bit similar to the concept of eye consciousness perceiving its object.
Tendang azu mizin anglo ya semgam la ya taji dam de yong dewa di mangshu di wangshi le tempi chorwa gi jesun rog do asra kansna ani nganzu gi wangbu suji nga de tebi gi yul de tetab gi chongwi gi ani chorwa shiba di ta nganzu subi gi wangbu manyen pardo pe ke chok chok chen kadu ne yoba inza ani nganzu chorwa mang chaji ti jesun ro sha ko asres ro ti jesun ro wandi da chorwa ji jesun ro wandi ani karse warda teni semla ya gadu ka kanga mangbo chi yong de ya di kansin phugi chorwa ji jesun ro sha ko ro
So here, since sense consciousness are dependent on physical sense faculty, so what happens that as long as the sense faculties are intact, they are functioning, we tend to somehow kind of let ourselves influenced by sense faculties. So as long as our sensory faculties are intact, then we somehow let ourselves be kind of influenced by many different kind of sensory faculties, including feeling different things and so on and so forth. So because of that, in our life, we tend to experience multiple different levels of feelings and so on and so forth, because we let ourselves influenced by the sense consciousness, and that sense consciousness are again induced by the sensory faculties that they contact.
ta nambi shong la khar she war islam di wang she gi chorwa tsam gi jesu mandro ba yelo rang ki tone yula ya cheba chia gi jongdar chia di kechen bu shu sigi yores yelo rang ki tole ya ani yula cheba chia di ani yelo rang ki tone yula cheba chia di shukchen bu leon di kab kab la ya chi wang she ga ro la soba ombo le kyen khan shor me ba ni ya wang she ga ro la soba yung yores ani so rabi jesu manjuba pigi sem tembo chin de to ge ya yelo rang ki tone samlo shukchen bu tang tu ba na ani kanga nyon ro chi tisung yoras ra
Since sensory faculties, sense consciousness are highly dependent on sense faculties, so in many of the kind of Buddhist text, they put a kind of emphasis on the importance of um, kind of prioritizing the mental consciousness that is not dependent on the sensory faculties. And when we try to analyze objects with the kind of faculty of mental consciousness, not the kind of physical sense consciousness, then what happens is that, sorry, what happens is that sometimes even the sense consciousness could also kind of we could also kind of minimize the ability of the sense consciousness and enhance the ability of the mental consciousness, because sense consciousness tend to kind of deviate or tend to influence by feelings. So therefore emphasis is placed on mental consciousness.
ti yung yo ba di tanang zu loi rig chi tan lori dün che on di tina na la mangi bi lo se chi na la mangi bi lo se sha go res ti ten te yung yo res ra nganzu du se nganzu en pe 아주 가서 다지 펜수 동바 때니 아니 두스 대바이나야 일로랑 기톨이야 somos chimbo stanjene migma 맞음하지 상로 땅 대바이나야 대바이나 비기 있지 율그 나와 대단 가고요 말미 체대어래 이나야 아니 네바 마용와 진짜 망부 연구어레스 대가서는 슈로디 일로 코랑 키로요 반사 원식이 디 아니 네번 만져봐 원식이 소유지서 만들어 일로 랑기 똑기 디 연구어레스
So the one kind of distinction or one possibility of understanding the distinction between sense faculty, sense consciousness, and mental consciousness could be understood from one particular types of consciousness that is explained in the seven typology of consciousness. It is called the object is appeared but not ascertained. That's one particular consciousness, appeared but not ascertained. So when that kind of consciousness appears, what happens is that we may perceive the object may appear to your senses, but you are not able to ascertain it. For instance, sometimes you are immersed in a particular kind of object, then the things that you hear may not you may not be able to ascertain what is just be said. You just heard something, but you're not able to ascertain something. So at that particular moment, what happens is that your mental consciousness is more active than the sensory faculties.
단다 걔네들 도난 총 얘기 말했어요. 네 살카시들 랍사이로. 간주 템버 좀 된디 꾸샹그레스. 탄가샹그레스. 그래서 남비기 템비 꾸치 남비 템비 꾸 센데인지기 뭐나? 가드 이나야 젠드 좀요 말했어. 젠좀 샤지 샹가 말했어. 단다디 아니 힌두다 미딕 비tam발로 소바드니 아니 젠좀 딩이 마무샹다 요레스. 남비 tembi ku shangdi chen zum de yu shang mars pigi tu nyamba sha de bigi ani ku din di shang yor dine ya chen zum yo mares ngil ta lamrum ngaz mamu she lamrum thi gala lamrum ni she bi pigi shinni drub go yo ba na lamrum ni she bi shinni dribi gi tab di shinji malo ba ten go gres de nalo la ya ke che shu chi la ya 믹 하장 체대어 마인바 좀대어 마인바 랑소르 샤고르 세디 걔네 전부 쇼진 송요레스 들 균제 요러스라 망체지 곰에스라노 람사 믹좀 샤지 치더스 tin 남비 쇼시 곰갸다 마레스긴 삼선 쩨모란라고 삼선 원이 서로 느끼기도 스라
And if you kind of some of you might have noticed that when we paint a kind of a Buddha, or when we kind of make a statue of the Buddha, and then you might notice that we often depict his eyes kind of slightly open, not fully closed. So the reason behind this particular tradition is that whenever kind of when we engage in a deep meditative kind of equipoise, our eyes should not be fully closed. I often tell this in our Lamrim classes that in order to actualize the shamatha practice, in order to actualize the calm abiding mind, we should kind of fully embrace the techniques that are taught to actualize the calm abiding mind. And one of the most important technique to actualize shamatha, or to actualize the calm abiding mind, is that our eyes should not be kind of too closed. Our eyes should not be widely open. It should be kind of placed in a kind of very balanced manner. So therefore, if you look at any statue of the Buddha, you could see that his eyes are not fully widely open and not fully closed. So the important thing is that even when we depict him engaging in meditative equipoise, you could see that his eyes are slightly open. So the significance of this is that, even when we engage in the meditative, we do not have to really fully close our eyes, but slightly open. And if you look at many other kind of non-Buddhist Hindu gods or deities, you could see that you could see their statue being depicting like eyes being fully closed, but that is not a Buddhist tradition. So therefore, from Buddhist point of view, even when someone is engaging in a deep meditative kind of practice, you could still do so with your eyes slightly open.
The nega careers laundi, in the things in Gomia di, things to Goms laundi, things in the be one Geshe-la, things to Gom said your Koreomares. Things drew on the Geshe-la Drugores. Geshe-la Drugores. Yellow rangaton things to Gomgores. Things to go on the cake the Mazona, Cheshuti, Chiwan the Gobanis love your Rosra. 아니 미 베디 좀 나고 차와나 진원 레야기 아니 간조 레 담보래 신도는 년가 요레스 진원 레야 진원 숙진 볼래야 아니 미 하장 그 당바이나 고발 레야기 년가 요레스 년가 디니리 트로비체도 되네 미 란소를 샤고야지 미 란소를 샤니 베드 맞좀마치 아니 이시 삼로랑 기토라야 라 미발에 삼로 단도 공바지 장투바이나 아니 원시기 이 율로 tro야디 까투고요레스 곰드리드네 까투고요레스 아니 이 일로 랑라야 라몬토바치 로 샘라 라몬토바치 들어 땡긴즈 고미야 조디 샘라 라몬토바치 제대로와스로 들에 샘라 라몬토바디 치기 수드 트로라 소비 유그 이위 만트로바치 만트로바 로 일로 랑 가르레 삼는다고 샘 텔 조토야기 라모토비치도 인자 아니 신이 생긴 공고라서 두스 비기 왕볼 레 딘디 nenga지 시고레스다
So the reason behind why our eyes should be kind of slightly open, its significance is not to do with the meaning of the kind of calm abiding mind that we are striving to achieve, because this calm abiding is could not be achieved through sense consciousness. It's not a kind of it's not kind of part of the sense consciousness, but it's a lot to do with the mental consciousness. It is a so in order to actualize calm abiding, and we should be able to remove or discard two primary obscurations or that obscurations that could hinder for the actualization of calm abiding. And the one obscuration is called mental laxity or mental kind of drowsiness, in the where your mind becomes very dull. And the other obscuration is called mental excitement, where you become too excited about things. So in order to avoid these two obscurations, we have to kind of maintain our eye in a very balanced form, because closing the mind could bring mental laxity, and opening your eye very wide could bring excitement and distraction, and so on and so forth. So in order to avoid these two kinds of obscurations, we should maintain our eye in a very balanced form, and by doing so, we could really kind of enhance our ability of mental consciousness and slightly reduce the influence of physical sense consciousness. And then by enhancing our ability of the mental consciousness, we could overpower the sense consciousness that we usually tend to kind of always remain influenced by. And then by engaging in more of these practices, we could ultimately gain control over our mental consciousness. And then once we gain control over our mental consciousness, even though we see object, we may hear objects, the objects may come from our sense consciousness, but we can still control that, and we won't be kind of get influenced by these external objects. So that is the whole purpose of shamatha practice, or practice of calm abiding, to gain control over our mental consciousness.
Derdinzada yilo rangi tolaya samlo shukchen bu tawandi. Pigi ombo namju ombo rangare ombo len gyos ke da drog marwasra. Ombo nalala ya sukshaya de chibaji yarwas. Ina ya ombo da yul cheba ina ya. Ani wanshi shukchen bu mayon yungu mewadi. Ta sibures ta sibure dosra. Tu samdangandi ombo di yujin wanshi shana digmeba. Ta wanshi di yu korang din shana da dilijam digmeba. Then di ne mambu lewandi ta yu rig sam sal samti. Ani shibala shagova di ta weme toch. Danga ta weme lagra ta weme suru sheda ta
So with regard to that, what we can kind of confirm is that there is a distinction between mental consciousness and sense consciousness. And the more we try to enhance our ability of mental consciousness, we could somehow reduce the influence of kind of sense consciousness. And when we gain control over our mental consciousness, or when we enhance our mental consciousness, during that time, we are not really kind of fully rejecting the ability or the functioning of the sense consciousness. At that time, the external objects are still there, the sense faculties are still there. But what happens is that we are somehow minimizing the impact, or minimizing the influence of the sense consciousness, so that we could avoid distraction. And at that particular time, when we could gain control over our mental consciousness, what we could say is that the object that we see is not the consciousness, and therefore mental consciousness is just a mere perception, a mere seeing of the object is the consciousness. So there is we could not posit the object is consciousness, but the mere seeing and mere perceiving of its object is the consciousness.
The mambu shuji da semgong rigbi namja sheba ina ya. Wang shi ngal dembi. Ombi number shiba ngal dembi ge. Ani chik namsha ji mato. Ani yilo di nani chik yilo chamyo tola ya. Ani sheba shedi kali kabu yorwasra. Shindu kali kabu yorwas. Ta wang shi nga chiki jesu drojini. Ani shedeba ina. Ani nganzu ta tsorwa tsamgi jesu drojachi. Sorwe jesu drojachi. Nganzu tongya da koya reya. Ani nyongya di korangi jesu drodeba ina. Teni sem tuk drojachi mato. Sem pak pebu yongya di shindu nikali kabu chagwa res. Tongya reya di pigi gyunsen di cheni nguyo nisu kari ime tola ya. Ani yilog samlashi tangtu baya na. Ani karso da jik sem pak pebu yongya di. Thakdundu da namba sanji bi shoni nyumu tuksum sayachi. Shewara da nyumu sengi shewara da nyumu sengi di yang ishik toni yor mato wanshik tola zawa nini yor mares. Tindri nyumu di jambala yang ilu rangi toni rigba drimni samlutanya re mato wanshik toni kadzusuki pi yul teba ina yang nyumu ani shukchong tanya nipachik zawa nini nye yor mares tarwa.
And then there are many different, presentation of kind of psychology or description of mind. And in many of these descriptions, people tend to only explain the sensitive faculty, sense consciousness, and their engagement with its object. such as how we see things, how we hear things, and so on and so forth. And they somehow tend to miss the most important point, that is the engagement of the mental consciousness and its influence to our well-being. And if we only focus on the sensory faculty, sense consciousness, then somehow we are only focusing on what we feel, what we feel, what we see, what we hear, and so on and so forth. So by only focusing on this part will not kind of serve the purpose of kind of studying mind, because the whole point of studying mind is really to reduce kind of negative emotions and so forth. And by only focusing on the sense consciousness could not serve its purpose. It will only enhance more, negative emotions. So the what is required is that we should kind of level up our understanding and try to focus on the mental consciousness and its engagement with its object and its influence to our well-being. Because when we talk about negative emotions or destructive emotions, that cannot be posited at the level of sense consciousness. Sense consciousness, negative emotions only occurs at the level of the mental consciousness. So until and unless we have a fully grasp of the mental consciousness that is beyond the sensory faculties, we will not be able to kind of recognize the negative emotions, and if we could not recognize them, we will not be able to overcome them. So therefore, in order to overcome the negative emotions, the most important thing is to recognize them and also to try to understand the mechanisms of the mind, not only at the level of the sensory faculty but also at the level of the mental faculty as well.
원식이 뉴무기야기 낀치에 뭐도 뉴무 가서 다지 뉴무르 땅에 숙충 땅에 아 로버치야디 칼카보레 도스라 잠블리
So
나와야 지 비게 원식기서 율로 가즈스기 마음부서 디츠기 아니 착단 숙실로 도스라 샘금 마디바 망도라스라 로자타 카시 콘다 드르바이나 단다 잠블리 나올라야 샘금 마키바 드링이 망도라스라 하든지 지 롱바 하장기 벤제 야퇴여서 됐을라 아니 샘바 마키바 진댕이 망도 소리 차고르다 오늘 비심주 집안 니 차고라스라 이 가서는 비게 율 차트 생신 이로 안시 원시기 조율 망타니 아니 샘 tukdo야지 디소르 만디로지 삼서 서로 됐어
if we focus too much on the sense consciousness, that could only kind of contribute for the kind of arising of more negative emotion instead of reducing them. The whole purpose is really to minimize the negative emotions. But if we miss the mental consciousness and if we only focus on the sensitive faculties, then it could contribute, it could have a kind of counterproductive effect. For instance, the sense consciousness primarily enhances, negative emotions. For instance, if we look at the developed countries of modern age, we could see people are more depressed. There are more kind of issues related with mental health more than ever. There are more kind of such cases as compared to the previous time. The reason is that in modern developed countries there are more objects of sense consciousness. There are more things to see, there are more things to hear, and so and so forth. And then, since there are so many avenues or so many objects of distraction and so many objects out there, and we are not able to kind of somehow control that, so therefore people become more unhappy, more depressed, and so on and so forth. So therefore, by simply focusing on the sense consciousness will not kind of give us the result that we desire. So therefore, the most important thing is to focus on the mental consciousness.
단단 니만 아주 진짜질라 저버시 총르다라 저버시 총르스 안주야 마시에 안주 오스트레일리아에 야간이 dur는 게시라 아 결혼이 견주 지도 삼 야부여 말다 생이 견주 말 네가 나란 소리야 지 semkom magiba semkom 지 magiba di gyaga da Australia durna gyaga nyong yosares ngi dindij lavrada ngage ji di khakasa de teda khakalasra a jugu nganzu Google translation nala ya tagje chi di gyacha chonga di Australia mandos gyacha chonga mandos ta ngone chageng chani samdana zawni ni yom musiwa soro jirasra 안주 지 벤저다 지 튕긴 괜찮은 상담나 오스트레일리아 나라야 뇽마도 마 용무시 거더라스 내가 코너 때문에 내가 딘리도 고소스
So in one of our previous class discussion, we discussed about we did a kind of survey or discussion about Australia versus India, which country has more kind of unhappy people. And then at that time, I was not kind of criticizing, but I randomly said that I think India is a more happier country than Australia, regardless of the good facility here. And that time, my translator immediately responded that that's quite not possible. And then later we did check on the Google, and somehow we found that Australia has 50% of more kind of people are kind of a bit unhappy as compared to India. It's there in Google. So what that suggests is that if external facility guarantees happiness, that's not we can't have that result because Australia is obviously more developed than India. So therefore, what this suggests is that if I'm not mistaken, you know, kind of focusing on the external facilities kind of could not guarantee the inner peace.
당한주 지 롱바기 팀리 야코브 팀리 아니 지 장저 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 제당리 벤주 내당리 쇼야부라다 오스트레일리아 아 이번에 안주 샘라 강가 여기 망보 배워라서 이 가르레세 내가 태워줘지래다 이 가르레 가신 레고레스 안절로 고얀 튕긴 가리치다니 아니 잠블레나니 약슈지래다 안절 샘검 내가 가진 이유거레세 이 태워래다서
So if we look at Australia, it's way more developed than many other countries. We have better facilities. We have very developed, very kind of vibrant and boosting economy. And regardless of this, we could still see many people struggling with mental health. And then this situation should pose a question to us: why this is happening? Why this is the case?
테르딘자 당얘기 dom자디 먼저 지 왕비시바기 유율지어라 텔라 인야디 망자샤스 티돈 레기도스라 왕시기 주율기 치야디다 망자샤스 일로랑 기토니 삼로지 땅토와나 데니 왕시 가르무가 가른 통 고용나야 아니 샘드 투구 말했더라 샘 투여다 뇽도 그랬어 먼저 일로랑 기토니 제바치야 됐어 뇽다고 살았어
That's all. So with regard to this, I personally feel that the most important thing is really to enhance our focus on the mental consciousness, because if we focus only on the sense consciousness and its engagement with its object, then we tend to let ourselves be influenced by what we see, what we hear, what we feel, and so forth. And then if we, only remain within that, then we somehow miss our kind of mental consciousness and its experience and so on and so forth. And then, unless and until we could place more importance and focus on the mental consciousness, then we could not kind of remove the influence of sense consciousness to us. So therefore, I think it's crucial to kind of delve deeper into the functioning of mental consciousness.
내가 제바이나야 또 그치 되즈 만슈디 또더 그치도 딴 거라서 이 원식 주일 삼레마도 이제 샘래야 배 깔리카보다 이제 달 룽아 있음 치니 아니 야차 만슈디 룩 톨에 딴 거요 반자 샘 그톨에 종들 치야디 용자고 반자 아니 간저 샘래야 강가 용야디 마음바에나 마음만 로식 살아서
So if we kind of study our own life, if we analyze our own life, we dedicate most of our time on kind of enhancing our experiences of sense consciousness. For instance, we devote most of our time working, making money, improve our lifestyle, gaining more facilities. So most of these efforts are really a lot to do with sense consciousness, sense consciousness, and experiences, so on and so forth. So that means we are focusing more on the kind of well-being of our body rather than our mind. So if you could emphasize or put more effort on the well-being of our mind and try to enhance its mechanism, then there will be there could be better results in the future. Otherwise, if we continue to put more focus on sense consciousness alone, so in the future people become more unhappy and so on and so forth.
that 저번 징에만 샘생의 과열이스 샘 가진다고 이제 샘 과열에 간드 샘이스 계제 들려와나 제가 다시 쉬어나 또 샘디 비 주구주구서 요거 섬담아이나 되니 샘 니에 파샤니 수수라니 니 두고요 말이스 주구주구서 지 섬담는 줘봐이나 샘 파샤니 수수라니 니 말이스 니루 디시어스라
So now here, when we talk about the mind and consciousness and so forth, so the one possible kind of doubt you have is then where is the mind? And when you ask where is the mind, your question has an assumption that somehow mind should be findable, be able to pinpoint somewhere out there. So if we have that kind of notion, that kind of assumption that mind should be findable through our senses, then we are somehow making a mistake. So there are certain things that is not kind of findable, not be able to pinpoint. If we expect to pinpoint everything, then we may not even find the self as well. So Gisela is asking, is it too much for today? So if you have any questions, we will take one of them and then we can call it a day.
Thanks, Geshe-la. It's so useful. Thank you. My question is, you described consciousness as being a mere perception of an object. So the action of perceiving an object is what consciousness is. And how can a mere perception continue to the next life?
나게나기 시바디시 제비 kapsula 세신 릭바디 시베 고 다시비 친이로 샤르와 지단 디다부 세신 릭바디 닝삼 가서 치치말라 간데 두고여서 코비 균디 세고라다 치치말라 간데 두고여서 세신 릭바디
그래서 남들 역시 션드고 말았어.
by taking the fastest jet.
근데 그 균토네 라 균토네 레드 쉐어스 안저지 시바 참말로게 사리 참말로 아니 균 레드 인고서 말했어 사도도 안신간 로지나 나로지나 안신가디 균 끼워치면 레드 킬렌 투고면도스.
So here, when we talk about the continuity of a consciousness, we have to understand this from the point that the continuum of the consciousness may go to the next life, and I personally feel that the sense, as far as the sense consciousness are concerned, I don't think they could kind of go to the next life. And usually the kind of continuity of a consciousness goes to the next life.
자위기 지단기 때 일로기 아니 일로 참무디 라 일로 남자 시험원디 일로 차란 이치기도 하더라 일로 라바디 원실을 땜비기 일로지 원시다 하장기 가서 다지 댄스 친구 영인기 일로 찍으시고 그랬어 일로 찍도 참무 쇼지 남자 치고 그랬어 나균 쪼르야디 일로 참무디 균 로고다 쓰라
So here, the mental consciousness that we're discussing, that mental consciousness is also further categorized into two different ways. One is the gross, mental consciousness, and one is more subtle consciousness. And when the gross, mental consciousness kind of does not go to the next life, and I think the most subtle mental consciousness, that could continue, or that continuation may go to the next life.
다들 간수 가서 통야 레야스키 요 말하다 대표길래야 아니 케바 투소 변 아니 제시 예샤주 털어야 가주스기 상로 땅와이나 샘나라래 고차야지 고차야지 더 용고도서라 디마도 고독직 마셔나 가주 먹어 가주스 제시 야바해나야 깔가보다 나는 깔가보 벤도 잠시 왔느라
So here, as far as the explanation about the mental consciousness is concerned, since these explanations are not kind of tangible, it's difficult to kind of grasp at the outset. So the most important thing is really to go through the text that explain this kind of concept, and to try to develop an intellectual understanding of what is being said, and then you should kind of analyze further, and you should study further. So without that kind of intellectual understanding of our discussion, the topic of the discussion, it is a bit difficult to grasp at the outset.
단주시원하죠. 아니 왕싱아 그 제수답이 일로락바 일로락바 나다 지당 베날 라미나 용초그레스 딱 그런 람하고 용초그레스 다 도저 상망로 간주다 르숨 카트원디 디기 아니 이샘 참무디 톨이야 지 바차샤야 소리지 마도 바차 조시지 마도 코랑 균디 개어치만 red 표시 가버렸어. 샘 참무디 톨이야 샘 참무디 톡만 매봐 타만 매봐지 디레도스라 디 톨이야 아니 누바치 누바스는 다 슈소르지 돼야지 배는 안주 아니 이마치 루제제가 들어와이나 디 슈도디 아니 루제제샤교디 안주 수부돌 대샤에서 통샤에서 기어만에 디 슈도디 상이나니니 지 용거라다 팬지 디가 상이 직자와나 가장 슈디가 슈질레 아니 수부야 드려서 봐 디 소르지 아니 삼로 라바 디 삼로 담이기 아니 니바 니슈 소르지 아니 샘 참디가라 아니 레야치 디 니바델라 아니 제마 ቄ 셴버지 차원디 아니 니바디 야 펠치니 아니 야르드라이치 다드스 캔자오레도스라
So here, when we talk about the subtle and gross levels of mental consciousness, when our mind, subtle mind, kind of departs from our body when death occurs, so to speak. At that time, I think the only subtle mind kind of travels to the next life. Otherwise, all the gross level of consciousness, including the gross mental consciousness, their continuity could not travel, but rather their influence or their activities could leave an imprint on the subtle mind, and then that subtle mind will go to the next life. So this is somehow similar to our when we do a kind of when we go to the gym, for instance, when we do kind of exercise on one day. That effect may not be evident on a body on that day, but it will definitely have an impact on it. So similarly, when we engage with our gross level of consciousness, they will leave an imprint on the consciousness. And if you could leave an imprint on the subtle consciousness, then its continuity could go to the next life. And in the future, when that imprint is that could activate it by meeting with another kind of factor.
다간지 샘 참무 기어치만 동인디 비다 율릭 비차소로지 율릭 비차디 아니 가디는 내쳐고 살았어 르드 더로 와이나야 율릭 비차디 베나 내쳐고레스 디코란 레다 라고 말다 디 소르지다 샘 참무디 신두 차비 샘디 아주 배전의 지역을 마음 좀 메시지 디 소리지 대신도 꼭 인사를 왔어라 대수 삼아다 아니 간지 저소 만주다 지 리그바권에 드비샤야지다 아니 양지 딘디키 요사 말했어 디 뇽아랑 그 저거에 내룩지
So here, when we talk about the subtle level of the consciousness, the most subtlest form of mental consciousness has the ability kind of, may go to the next life along with its imprints. And that subtle mind is kind of, difficult to articulate through words. It's difficult to kind of conceptualize. So therefore, they are beyond our verbal and conceptual capabilities, but rather they have to be understood only from our experience. So they could be understood only from our experience rather than kind of verbal description.
다시 Thank you.
Final Lamrim prayer, page 12 in a small booklet. From my two types of merits vasa space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a grand length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold the Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be grounded boundless peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time. By even this graded path to enlightenment completed, due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtues practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Thank you very much.